Welcome to the Lucas Rockwood Show. I'm a yoga teacher, a trainer, a serial entrepreneur, a father, a nutritional coach. But first and foremost, I'm a student. I like learning, and with this show, I go out and find smart people, interesting people, medical doctors, researchers, academics, yoga teachers, movement specialists, everything related to health and wellness, and I pick people's brains and find their best information, and I share it with you on the show, selfishly so I can learn, but selflessly so that hopefully it will improve your life. On this week's show, we're talking about intimacy and brain mass and brain health, the neuroprotective tendency of close physical relationships, in some cases touch, but also just deep connection with people. This is all new information to me, and it's really important. If you think about health, you think about our three different bodies. It's really important to separate what we're really talking about. You think about our chemical body, that's pretty much our hormones and all the wish-wash of stuff sloshing around inside of us. You think about our electrical body, it's your nervous system. And then you think about your bacterial body, the 3 pounds of stuff in your gut, and all of the bacteria living throughout us. In fact, there's more microbes than there are actual human cells in gross numbers in our body. And so we have these three bodies, our chemical body, our electrical body, and our bacterial body, and they're all at play. And some people get obsessed with one thing. They're just obsessed with the microbiome and taking probiotics and gut health. And some people are just obsessed with the nervous system. A lot of people in my world, in the yoga world, are just constantly doing nervous system training, brain entrainment, meditation, guided pranayama, these kinds of things. And then some people get obsessed with hormones, our chemical body, the wish-wash, again, the sloshy chemicals inside of our body that really affect everything we do. They affect how the color red looks to you, whether it turns you on or has no effect at all. And these things are really at play all the time. The reality, of course, is all three of these bodies are truly important. And at any given time in our life, probably one of the three legs of that three-legged stool is out of whack. Your endocrine system, your chemical body, for better or for worse, at this time is very often imbalanced. And so specifically when we're talking about insulin, specifically when we're talking about our sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, specifically when we're talking about stress hormones like cortisol, almost everyone listening is suffering from some kind of chemical imbalance. So it's important to understand how your endocrine system works, different things that influence it positively, reduce the negative impactors, and boost up the positive ones. Hope you'll find this week's show interesting. I sure did. If you'd like to support the show, really simple thing you can do when you're listening, take a screenshot, post it to your Instagram or your Instagram stories, and tag me. It's at Lucas Rockwood or at YogaBody. And you can also leave a review at yogabody.com/reviews. It just helps more people find the show, helps me stay motivated to keep doing what we're doing. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome, everyone. Today's show is called The Sexy Brain, Intimacy and Health. I am joined here with Dr. Lindsey Bergson. Dr. Lindsey Bergson is a thought leader in functional medicine and women's health. She has been in clinical practice for nearly 4 decades. Her research focuses on hormones, nutrition, and the gut. She's written 21 books, including her most recent, which we'll be chatting about today, called The Sexy Brain, Safe Hormones, Smart Women, The Hormone Deception, among many, many others. You can find all her books, all her work at drlindseybergson.com. Lindsey, welcome to the show.
I am excited to be talking to you, especially that you're in Spain.
So when we talk about sex and we talk about intimacy in the context of health, I think everyone intuitively knows that it's a sort of biological need and it's a drive. I guess the challenge is, here it is Tuesday afternoon. It's easy enough for me to wander down to the health food store and pick up some new protein powder. It's easy enough for me to sign up for some new gym membership or yoga membership. What I mean is all the solo stuff is all the self-directed stuff. I can self-track, I can go get some blood work done, I can supplement, but it's pretty difficult when you tell me, hey, your health relies on intimacy, not just with yourself, but with another person. That makes it really, really challenging. That's not something that you can just do a quick Google search and shop out. You can't pay for a personal trainer to give you intimacy. I mean, you could try, but it's probably not gonna fulfill you. So how do you address this fundamental challenge, which I know some people listening are just thinking, hey, I need to amplify intimacy in my life, but there's plenty of people listening who are just saying, I've got none. What do I do?
That is such a great question because so much research has been coming out these days that people who spend a lot more time on social media have less sense of connection and more anxiety and depression. We're seeing young kids at 2, 3, 4 years old spending so many hours on the screen, and then they're having trouble connecting. So connection, as I've discovered as I've done a lot of my research, connection, where you stand in front of somebody and you look them in the eyes and you feel connected. It can be at the gym with a trainer. It can be in line at the post office. It can be with your best friends where you go to Starbucks or some kind of place and share coffee. My alma mater is the University of Michigan, and they've been able to show that when women hang out together and really connect, we release hormones. And the reason that my book is called Sexy Brain is that your brain is run or ruled by sex steroid hormones. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, the love hormone, oxytocin. It keeps our brains at a healthy volume with excellent cognition. So it makes sense that we're the humanity, the community of man and women. And nature wants us to stay connected because we're evolving as a community. And the more we have great connection, we release these hormones that caretake our brain. But today we text more than talk, so that doesn't give us hormones that protect our brain. And we desire intimacy less. There's a lot of replicated studies, and in science, that's a big deal. If you have a study and it says one thing, and then an independent laboratory copies and replicates what you said, then we say that's more weighted of information. And it's telling us that we as humans are wanting to connect less. We have less hormones. Younger men have less testosterone. Younger people are wanting to make love less. So in your own life, if you want to keep your brain healthy, look for moments, cameo moments, even with strangers in line at the grocery store, where you can look them in the eye and have a little few conversations, paragraphs shared. That will release hormones that protect your brain. The same with your family. Have dinner at night with no phones. Look at each other in the eye. Ask how the day went. This releases brain protective hormones so that you can maintain a sexy brain.
And when we say protect your brain, is that from neurodegenerative disease? Is that from, what are we talking about specifically?
So when we're young and healthy, and our brain is young and healthy, it has volume. We know that as we age, we shrink. Your skin shrinks, your organs shrink, and your brain, especially a little area in your brain called the hippocampus, where your memories live, it shrinks. And in fact, Alzheimer's disease and a number of cognitive decline diseases literally are due to the hippocampus shrinking. And the term for that is hippocampal shrinkage. And hormones maintain a healthy volume. Now, at the University of McGill, at the Department of Psychiatry, they took aging people who were starting to have all these frailty signs and they're slower to think, and they walk slower, all the things that we connect with getting older. And they measured the volume of the hippocampus, and it was starting to shrink. As your hippocampus starts to shrink, you start looking on all levels older. So they gave women shots of estrogen. They gave gents shots of testosterone. They measured with MRIs the size of the hippocampus before they gave the hormones and tracked them after a few weeks. And the hormones refluffed up, revolumized the size, literally, of the hippocampus. It was statistically significant. And people started to act. They stood a little taller. They talked a little faster. They felt more facile and more sturdy and less overwhelmed, which are all things that people feel as they get older as their hormones go south. So it turns out that hormones help maintain our cognition and our sanity. They're not just about sexy and reproductive things. They rule many more aspects of biological real estate, but especially your brain.
Interesting. I never heard that your actual brain volume is changing. That's pretty dramatic. That helps motivate me for sure. Let's unpack the intimacy thing
And you
a little
make
bit.
testosterone when you hug. When you make
I didn't know
love
that.
and you hug,
Interesting.
you make more. You do. And exercise helps you keep your testosterone levels up, which helps keep your brain a better volume.
Yeah. So let's unpack this intimacy thing a little bit more, because intimacy means something very different to a 12-year-old than it does to a 25-year-old, to it does to a 75-year-old. And so different phases of life, intimacy is different things. But if I understand correctly, the same sort of oxytocin hit, the same sort of cortisol drop, all these things can happen. Is that right? Am I on the right path people can be totally non-sexual, maybe not even in connection. Like you mentioned, a grocery store conversation that has depth and meaning and real connection could potentially trigger those same feelings, or not quite.
I'm very glad that you're taking time to do a deeper dive into what the heck is intimacy. So intimacy can be up in the boudoir, and we know you release a lot of hormones if you have sex, especially with somebody you respect and you love and you have a regular relationship with. You make more hormones with regularity. The science actually supports the nuclear family. But you can have intimacy as a human being if you have the intentionality to move through your day and get connected to the person in front of you. And if parents could start teaching and downloading this to their children, because today kids are so used to the screen and they're so prioritized in the family to be more important than any other family member, which I think is to the detriment of the children. Then when they talk to a peer or to their teacher or to another adult, they don't have the tools with which to really connect into them and be present with them. Now, our kids are our biggest mirrors, and they mirror what they see and hear at home. So if we are more with each other, being present, our kids will learn to do that, and that all releases for the whole family. When one family member, this has been clearly shown, either makes love or has wonderful community connections, and they're releasing more oxytocin, everybody else in the family releases more oxytocin. It's a familial deal. And there was one of my favorite authors was Thich Nhat Hanh. He was nominated for Nobel Peace Prize, and he wrote a book called Peace is Every Step. And he talked about, instead of arguing, instead of yelling, why not have a little breathing room where when things get disconnected, you sit with the person that you've had this discord with, mainly your kid or your mate or your mother-in-law, and you breathe together for a few minutes. You look in the eyes of each other and breathe, and you become present. And actually what that does on the hormonal level is getting more present releases hormones that keep your brain healthier, or in the book I refer to as a sexy brain. Is that helpful?
Yeah, very helpful. Very helpful. I'm trying to think about, so different people listening, and they're in different stages of their life, and everybody wants deeper connections. And while I think maybe some people lack the words or the ability to articulate it, I think people are feeling more isolated than ever before. And all the research I've looked at, as you mentioned earlier, really confirms that. People are, like you said, face down on screens, more connected, but less actual connections than ever. People are messaging and liking and hearting, but not actually spending time in the company of real people. People have less friends statistically. People have, less community. Religious structures have fallen apart in many countries, and a lot of the sort of social web, it just isn't there where it used to be. And so how does somebody go about trying to, knowing that they want to have a nice big brain, a sexy brain, they want to have a, cognition, and how do they start
size matters.
Yeah, size matters, exactly.
Size matters.
How do they start to think about this realistically when, they've got a very full life, and yet they feel this gap. And I've heard people say this specifically. Life is good. I just feel a lack of intimacy, especially in their people's intimate relationships. People say, we just don't have intimacy like we used to have. The kids take up all their time, or whatever it is. What are some strategies that you help people to think about in terms of rekindling intimacy, or in some cases, maybe for the first time?
I address all of this in my book, Sexy Brain, and I get emails and I get even handwritten letters, something that's really out of the blast from the past, from parents saying, this has really ignited my relationship, and I've even handed this book to my kid who's about to start dating, because this book tells you how to connect. I've got a chapter on connection, like what does that mean and how do you do it? I'm a dancer, so you have to really learn connection through dance. And it's interesting, I talk to my dance professional teachers a lot for that chapter. And I've got a chapter on how men and women can make love with each other, optimizing their hormones to protect their brain. And I give exact steps. I give steps by how you can do this in your community. But the bottom line, besides the all the directions in the book, plus I have an entire chapter on knowing where your hormones are at. And most doctors only check very cursorily 1 or 2 hormones in a blood. So I give a whole panel that you should run, and I give the exact steps to do in the book. But the idea is to live your life with an intentionality to be present, which is what all the spiritual teachers actually talk about, and to connect. So if you only text instead of talking, it's very narcissistic. You can go away from the phone anytime you want. You don't have to answer immediately. You could be multitasking, watching TV or doing a project on the computer while you're texting. You are not fully present and connecting. So if that's your only major way that you connect, you are training yourself not to thoroughly, authentically connect. But if you have the intention, so I just came from the post office, and I have to go there 2-3 times a week. I make sure I create relationships with the people who work behind the counter, even though they change a lot. I always open the door for somebody and have a little connection. And when I leave the post office and get into my car, I've already squirted out more oxytocin than I did before I went there, because I have this intentionality that I'm going to do that. But oxytocin is our hormone of connection. It's our hormone of feel good. It was originally thought to be the hormone of pregnancy because it's also a contractile hormone. So the mother that's about to give birth starts to release oxytocin in large amounts, so her uterus will contract and push the baby out. And then her breast will start to release it to let the milk go down. But the baby, so the mother's body that's birthing, is perfused with the hormone of connection. It's doing some other job descriptions, but it also has that. And the baby's body is thus, for the very first time, while it's going through the vaginal vault or whether it's coming out with C-section, the baby's body is perfused with oxytocin because the shock of birth is huge. And it's the first hormone that tells the new life that life is good, the world wants you, and your oxytocin is making the baby feel connected. But oxytocin leans on a lot of other things to be able to deliver these delicious connective signals. So you have to have healthy functioning thyroid. You have to have healthy functioning estrogen in both men and women. And all hormones require nutritional cofactors to do their hormonal magic. So that's why what you eat and your choices of food and how well you digest your food have a lot to do with whether your hormones can really deliver the delicious and protective signals that nature intended. So to just go to a doctor and say, I want to know what's going on with my hormones, and they only test your levels, whether it's in your saliva, blood, or urine, is a tiny little part of the story that doesn't tell you if the hormone can really deliver its signal. So I go into all that understanding, which is the bigger understanding. And I teach a lot these days for continuing education credits to medical doctors, nurse practitioners, on this new understanding of hormones, that they're this bigger picture that rule our lives, because I was a hormone scholar at Tulane Med School, so I get to share all this information.
I have a question for you that comes up a lot, is why don't medical doctors test for more hormones? Is it because it's expensive, they don't know how to read them, they don't want the data to come back? It's really uncommon. I mean, I rarely meet somebody who has comprehensive hormonal panels unless they've read a book like yours, or unless they've talked to a functional medicine doctor, or unless they just self-educated and walked in with a laundry list. Why is that? Do you have any ideas?
I think about this all the time, and I have a new course online which you can access through my website, Redefining Hormones in Today's Toxic World, because another Another glitch is that we've got a lot of pollutants that are assaulting our hormones. And when I've had family practice docs or gynecologists take my course, inevitably they start sending me emails. Why didn't I learn this in med school? So it's just, medicine has become compartmentalized. Hormones are supposedly in the purview of gynecologists who don't learn any of this. They mainly now give out birth control pills and do procedures, or urologists who don't know any of this, or endocrinologists who mostly deal with thyroid and diabetes who don't know any of this. So this is not yet taught in med school. And when I worked at Tulane, I had the honor of working with Elwood Jensen. He's the first guy who figured out how hormones work. So he discovered the very first estrogen receptor. Estrogen's the oldest hormone. It's been on the planet longer than any other hormone. It's had tons of time to become more complex. So women who are run by more estrogen were very complex creatures, and were biologically hardwired to do that. And then I got to work with Yanaki Gustafson. He discovered the second estrogen receptor. And they all say the deal of hormones is whether they can deliver their signal. And there's a laundry list of things, which I write about in the book, which play a role, and that none of this is yet taught in med school. And there's this horrific lag time between academia, which I've had the honor to be in endocrinology and academia, and it trickling into the clinical trenches. Whereas if you were in business, you're in a big company, things are very facile. Something shows up, and in a few years, the business world embraces it. But medicine has not historically worked like that. So you have to be very careful who you ask. Am I a candidate for hormones? Can you test my hormones? Most of the time, you get the inaccurate answer at this moment. So you've got to work with somebody who has been trained in the bigger picture.
I guess it's hard too. I mean, I think people are often critical of the medical community. I think they just get a lot of responsibility put on them. And in many cases, I guess, an educated medical doctor can even just look at somebody and they know there's hormonal imbalance. They can see signs of radical hormone imbalance. And it's just like it's triage, right?
No. So I have a really close, no, I don't. And medical doctors, when you need one for what they do, they're fantastic. And there's a lot of ways medicine has saved us. And we have the best ERs, and then there's ICUs. But in hormone medicine, that is not the case. So hormones rule everything, but they've been taught in med school as though they're only about perimenopause. And if you have any issue, give a birth control pill, which are hormone disruptors, by the way. We used birth control pills at Tulane as a control to test if a fungicide or herbicide was a hormone-altering chemical. But they are really, in terms of hormones, they are not taught this new understanding, and it's very frustrating for women so we have great medicine, but this is an arena where there's a tremendous amount of misinterpretation. There's 100 million women a year on birth control pills, which are now a proven hormone disruptor and gut wall damager. The data has been building up since the 1970s. I teach an hour course at the A4M, which is an anti-aging certification program, gut module. And it's usually to a few hundred medical docs that have now wanted to become functional medicine docs are sitting in the audience. And I go through this vast body of literature showing that if you have a genetic glitch and you go on birth control pills, you are highly likely to get gut wall damage, and how this works. And I take them through the 1970s when this was first written about in peer review up to the present. And they all sit there with their mouths dropped open in shock. And they go out and handing out birth control pills like M&Ms. Why have I never heard of any of this data? And the data is so well replicated on ultimately epidemiologically millions of participants in different studies. They just sit there, and we have to deal with their being so stunned that they never learned that bit of data. So for some reason, hormones are the rabbit hole of medicine, and we didn't know that they run so many things. We've delegated them to the female tract and the male tract, but we didn't realize that they were so global. The only study that's ever been done looking at what prevents Alzheimer's disease was called the Cache County studies. They've spun off about 30 papers based on this set of prospective studies where they took about 5,000, maybe it was 7,000 aging people who were all healthy and watched them age over time. So it's a prospective study where you're moving into the future. And they looked to see who got dementia and who didn't, and what did they think were the most protective factors. So if a woman had been on estrogen replacement for 10 years, she had a 50% reduced risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. Nothing's ever been shown to reduce your risk of Alzheimer's by 50%. And testosterone, which is lowering in younger men, will shut up the vulnerability gene for Alzheimer's, that ApoE4 gene. It literally makes it dysfunctional if you have healthy levels of testosterone, but gynecologists and neurologists don't know this data.
And I guess that gets into the question, I know that you're one of the pioneers with hormone replacement therapy, bioidenticals, and things like this. And it sounds great to boost my testosterone to turn off my risk for Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative diseases. But I mean, these hormones act like keys, right? You pull one key out and another key goes in. And so, I mean, we also don't know the long-term effects, the long-term effects of bioidenticals, and so how do you think about this?
Oh, we do. We have more and more studies where we have been following people for, long-term. So the studies that we have follow people on bioidenticals as they're aging versus non for the average of 3 to 10 years. And we've got some studies out of Finland that have tracked women on hormones, some of them bioidentical, for about 14 years. This one PhD student did this incredible assessment of Finnish women because they all get hormones from the Finnish government and they know exactly what they're on. And then they've got tumor and cardiovascular disease registries and they could see what was going on. So there actually is, at this point, quite a bit of data showing the benefits of hormones, especially that aren't taken orally, but we don't have these vast, huge, large randomized trials for it. But several of my friends just testified in front of the National Academy of Health Sciences about a month ago to try and get bioidentical hormones okayed by the FDA and thus available for insurance reimbursement for the average woman. And the argument was we don't have these huge randomized trials, which we basically have for patentable drugs because those are molecules the human body's never seen before, but the human body has seen and is set up for bioidentical hormones, which are exact copies of our own. But they put a kibosh. They said, no, we're not going to make this FDA approved. But the women who were on the board were gynecologists, endocrinologists, mature women, many of them in menopause. And quite a number of them went up at the end of this hearing. It was a testimonial hearing at the National Academy of Health Sciences. And one by one, not all of them, but a lot of them went up to my colleagues and said, I'd really like to go. Those bioidentical hormones, those sound really great. If my doctor calls you up because he doesn't know anything about it, will you mind working as a consultant with me? And one by one, each woman came up. They didn't want to pass the law, but they wanted to be on them because they saw the benefits.
I am interested, super interested. I guess my concern is that we have, so people, I'm 41, people my age, I know, even younger, are on testosterone. I would go to the gym. A lot of the bigger guys, they're taking supplemental testosterone because of online pharmacies and things. People get a lot of stuff these days. And I guess I am all for feeling good and I'll do whatever, I'll take all the replacement parts, all the replacement chemicals so that my health span is as long as it can be. I get a little concerned about when someone is in the first half of life making up for bad habits with anything, whether it's bioidentical or not, and I don't have anything to back that up, but it's just something that kind of raises a red flag for me, and you're way, way deeper in this. So I'm curious how you think about time, frequency, dose, and appropriateness and kind of intelligent use of these tools that we have, which there will become more and more over time.
That is a great comment. thank you for asking that comment. You ask actually very deep dive questions, so I appreciate it. Every single person has their own, Lucas, their own hormonal footprint. And so you can't just go on hormones willy-nilly. Some people at 80 will still have plenty of hormones. Some women through menopause will still have hormones. It varies from person to person. And you can't give a young man testosterone or he'll become infertile. He will literally become infertile. So with a lot of the younger guys getting less and less testosterone, you have to look at the causal factors, like are they chubby because fat cells make estrogen? Are they sitting too much? Are they wearing too tight of pants? Are they not exercising enough? And there are ways to boost testosterone even beyond lifestyle measures. But in a young man, you don't give testosterone replacement because they will become infertile, sterile. And so you have to be very careful to do other means, which there are other means available. But as I talk about in Sexy Brain, you want to get tested in a really right way, test all your hormones because they're a symphony and they function and dysfunction together. So you might have a thyroid problem and you keep running around trying to fix it, but it doesn't seem to stabilize. Well, it could be your adrenals, it could be your estrogen, it could be your oxytocin, all your hormones. If you have one hormone that's not been found, but it's tanking, it can influence all your other hormones. Like stress, cortisol, can sit on all your hormone receptors and block any hormone you have, no matter how perfect your blood levels are, from being able to deliver its signal. So my message is hormones are a bigger picture. They do run our brains, so you want to make sure that this bigger picture is watching your back so that your brain stays healthy and the brains of your kids stay healthy, because we know today that the brains of our kids are changing and they're not as healthy as they used to be. And part of that is due to hormone-altering chemicals. For example, oxytocin, we've all known now about endocrine disruptors, right? So I wrote one of the very first books on it like several years ago, which is how I got invited to be at Tulane. And we first looked at pollutants acting like estrogens. Then we discovered that they could block male hormones, androgens, and they could block progesterone, or non-organic turkey, for example, could block progesterone. But what we're discovering is your oxytocin, your feel-good hormone, is very vulnerable to pollutants. For example, like phenol A that lines the can, all cans at the moment, all bisphenol A substitute, even LaCroix, you're going to go from sodas to bubbly water, but they are lined with bisphenol A, and that can make your oxytocin receptor work less well, so you have more anxiety, depression, etc.
I did not know.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, fascinating.
And these hormones have a lot to do with our appetite, with our fat burning, with our muscle mass. They're global. So anyway, I just wanted to they're global. So you really want your hormones healthy and in balance and keeping you as well as you could possibly be. They're a big part of the show. Yeah.
Lindsey, I appreciate you coming on the show. I know this message is ringing true for a lot of people and they'll want to learn more. We will send people to drlindseybergson.com. Is there another place for them to connect with you online?
Yes, I have a radio show where I have a lot of the top people looking at many of these questions, and they've spent their careers diving into one aspect of it. It's called Dr. Berkson's Best Health Radio. And you can get it on iTunes, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Google, etc. For example, I just published a show yesterday on generic medications and should we care? And yes, we should. So that's another place that I'm hoping to educate people, because power is knowledge, and part of my mission is to help us all stay buffed.
If you've heard about our yoga trapeze teacher training course that we've been now hosting in 5 different countries and of course in our home base in Barcelona, but you've been unable to come join us, I'm excited to announce our first ever online version of the course. We're doing an academic version with at-home study, at-home practice, with an option to join us in the future if you'd like. But if you can't join us in the future, or if you'd just like to do the at-home version, we're really excited. We've got a great group of people already joined the course, and it kicks off very, very soon here. To learn about how the course works and for full information, go to yogateacherscollege.com, and on the top navigation, you'll see trainings, and click on calendar, and you'll see a link to the course there. It's our online yoga trapeze teacher training course. It's a 25-hour Yoga Alliance continuing education course. We're super excited. The course starts in just a couple of days, and so check it out. If you have questions, feel free to get in touch. I hope you can join us. This week's nutritional tip is in response to a listener question. And listener Charles says, "Hey Lucas, what form of vitamin K2 should I take, MK4 or MK7? This is a super nerdy question, but an important one. Here's the deal. Vitamin K2 works in synergy with vitamin D3. It's really important for bone health, among other things. This is a whole classification of fat-soluble vitamins, which people are very often deficient in. Vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin A. In fact, if you look at prenatal and postnatal vitamins and vitamins for children, very often, in fact, the moment a baby comes out, the first thing that the doctor does is sticks their foot with a K2 vitamin. Or my little boy, my first boy got a K2 shot in his foot, and then my youngest boy, they gave it to him orally, but K2 is really quickly given, helps with blood clots and healthy blood, so they're worried about blood clots during those initial days after birth, but it's a really important supplement that not enough people know about, not enough people are taking. It's pretty abundant in the plant world, but you have to eat some weird plants. Here's the deal, MK7 is being marketed as something that stays in your system longer, which is true, but all of the research out there is on MK4. So if you had to choose, you probably want to choose MK4 or choose both, but MK4, it seems like all the better research is there. You might have to take it more often because it gets depleted more quickly, but the general rule is if you're taking vitamin D, you should take it in conjunction with vitamin K2, the MK4 format. I know this is just super nerdy. Let me reiterate here. So we have 3 fat-soluble vitamins that get a lot of attention and a lot of press, and the research is pretty solid on all of them. You should be looking at them: vitamin A, vitamin K, and vitamin D. Now, they are not by any means the only fat-soluble vitamins, but they're ones that we're very often deficient in, and they're ones that are so important that prenatal, postnatal doctors, both for mothers and babies, are super worried about all 3 of them. And doctors tend to be worried about the most dramatic deficiencies only. So I would really take a look at these yourself. Here's the deal. You want to get MK4 format instead of MK7. MK7 is a newer, more marketed form. It's meant to stay in your body longer. It doesn't seem to have the same kind of bioavailability as MK4 from all the research that I've seen. It seems like if you had to throw a dart, you probably want to take MK4. Wow, this is so nerdy. I hope this is relevant for somebody besides you and me, Charles. Thanks for listening. We have a question here from listener Marta. Marta says, "I'm an aspiring yoga teacher, and I have one question for you. It might be a straightforward answer, but I'm simply wondering why in forward folds, more often than not, you're told by a teacher to breathe in and lengthen your spine, breathe out and fold forward, or something similar. Is this done to create space and length, or are there more reasons as well?" In yoga, we do a bunch of breath cueing, and there are different reasons for it. In terms of breathing into specific areas of your body, you'll hear yoga teachers cue this a lot, right? Inhale, lengthen your spine. Exhale, twist. Inhale, long back. Exhale, fold. And essentially what we're doing is syncing up breath and movement. And there, in many cases, there could be a case made for reversing it. So exhale, look forward. Inhale, fold. In the most cases, no. So when we're doing a full forward we're doing a full forward flexion when we're folding forward. An extension is a back bend, a flexion is a forward fold. When you exhale completely, it will be easier for you to forward fold. If you just look at your abdominal cavity, if you exhale all the way, it makes sense, you'll be able to fold more. So generally speaking, we would do forward folds on the exhale. But to confuse things, we'll often do the deepest of back bends on exhales as well. More often than not, I would think of it, number 1, metaphorically, and number 2, energetically, just syncing up your body and your breath and your movement. And number 3, understanding that you really can affect change locally in your body. And what I mean by that is, like, if you go on YouTube and stuff, you can watch people who, even amateur mind body practitioners, who will do little experiments where they'll focus on one area of their body, for example, their lower back, and they'll imagine that they're in a sauna and they're sweating, and many people can actually raise their skin temperature in that one area of their body. With breath, specifically, if you breathe into your rib cage, you can definitely exaggerate and exacerbate the movement there. And so the mind-body connection is kind of a misnomer. It's not that there's a mind-body connection, it's just the body-mind. It's all one. It's all integrated. It's impossible to separate the two. So focusing on a specific area of your body can be very helpful. But that'll give you a little bit of context, but no, in terms of inhaling, is it actually creating length? Well, in some cases, yes. So, your diaphragm is a funky muscle. And if everyone listening, just take your fingers right at the base of your rib cage and shove your fingers in there, it's a little bit uncomfortable. There is a funny muscle called your diaphragm, which contracts down. Imagine pulling on a balloon. That's what it does, and it creates a vacuum where your lungs fill with air. And when you do that, when you fill with air, it creates a brace and a pressure against your rib cage, and it can decompress your spine ever so slightly. Again, if you just imagine a small balloon filling up in your torso, you can imagine how that would be expansive and decompressing for your spine. So there is some anatomy, physiology, there is some metaphor there, and there is just some energetic play. Hope that's helpful.
This week's iTunes review is by Susie2412 from the USA. Susie2412 says, I have really enjoyed the podcasts. I've listened for about a month. This is now my favorite podcast. The content is timely and authentic. I am looking at yoga as a lifestyle of longevity, and this podcast hits the mark. Looking forward to learning in future episodes. Susie2412, you have won the Yoga Trapeze. Email us at podcast@yogabody.com and we will get that out to you.
If you're a regular Yoga Talk Show listener, you'll definitely want to get on my email list. Go to yogabody.com/sign me up. When you enter your email address there, we always have free giveaways every month. Yoga straps, water bottles, discounts in our shop, and all kinds of other things. When you sign up at yogabody.com/sign me up, I'll send you just one email a week with updates about the show, special offers, new courses, and valuable information that I think you'll find useful. So go to yogabody.com/sign me up to claim your free prize now.